Hi guys, this is Chet here from Avion Technology here in the Chicagoland area. We are a digital agency. What do? We actually work with other digital agencies to help them scale up. We also work with a lot of small businesses to help them scale up. And one of the interesting areas that we work in is product incubation. What do we do within product incubation? Well, we actually we get folks who have a product idea and they want to scale it up and become millionaires 10 years later. So yeah, product incubation is an exciting field, something that we have a lot of experience in. Usually it starts off with someone who has an idea about a product, and then we develop that into a prototype. Then we take the prototype and develop it into an MVP, which is a minimum viable product. We go to market with that, and then the product scales, they get more users, and eventually they have an exit. So that's the usual product incubation life cycle. So today I'm going to talk about something that a lot of product companies struggle with, SaaS companies struggle with, startups struggle with, which is getting that initial traction, getting those initial investors. So usually the flight path for a lot of these kind of startups is that they will, I've referred to this in my earlier videos, what I call the rule of 5. So usually there's about 5 people involved in a startup. I've usually seen this. There's one person who is the visionary, and then there's usually a CTO. There's usually a sales guy. There's usually a people's person, like an HR person, and then there's an admin person who does all the housekeeping, the finance, and all that. So the visionary has the idea, right? And it's usually he comes and contacts us, and the first thing to do is develop the prototype, right? So the prototype is usually financed out of some kind of angel investment, right? Sometimes it's personal savings, it's some kind of an angel investment. Once they're done with that, and once they actually go to the market, right, they usually need like a Series A funding from a VC, and at that point in time, a lot of startups struggle, right? So today's lecture is going to talk about how to raise money. So one of the areas sometimes I see a lot of entrepreneurs so fixated with VCs that they forget that there's also crowdsourcing. So remember that. And here are a couple of sites for crowdsourcing, right? So I'm sorry, for crowdfunding. So you can get your that initial Series A capital, also, and even the angel investment from these sources. So there's Kickstarter, there's GoFundMe, there's Fundraiser, and Fundable. If you are an entrepreneur and if you're looking to raise funds, definitely look at these. It's definitely a very viable option, especially if you do not have a rich aunt who's willing to sign you a check. Second, now, if you're going to go and approach VCs, and I'm just for a second, look at this 100 number. Again, I have seen that this 100 number is really important, and I'm going to tell you why. But before I say that, just a quick disclaimer: everything that I say today is based on my own personal experience. If you none of this is legal or financial advice. If you want that, go and meet a specialist. But this is just a conversation, so I hope this just helps you. There's 2 ways you can get your angel investments or your Series A. One is by approaching VCs, and the other is by crowdfunding, right? Usually what happens is, if your startup has some revenue, there's usually some basis for doing a valuation, right? And that's usually monthly recurring revenue or an annual recurring revenue, right? If you have some revenue, then that's the basis for doing the valuation. If you have some revenue, I would typically say that for your angel investors or even your Series A, try to keep the equity, the amount of equity you're offloading at less than 10%, right? Because you do not know how many future rounds of investing you might need to do. Another option is, if you do not have revenue, look at convertible notes. What are convertible notes? Convertible notes are basically a way to kind of say that, look, I don't have revenue right now, so I have no way of valuing this company, so I'm taking this on as a debt. And it's usually an agreement, like all debt agreements are, with the promise that at some future point in time, it'll actually get converted into equity, right? So that's a convertible note. Now look at the 100 number, right? This 100 number is critical for 2 reasons. Why? I have usually seen that in a lot of startups, it's usually you need to have 100 users, right? You need to have 100 users before your startup kind of becomes attractive enough so that VCs get attracted towards it, right? The second is that I have also seen that you need to make at least about 100 pitches before you start, the VC starts signing checks, right? So you need 100 users before you kind of start, that VCs start getting interested in you. But at the same time, you need to kind of make 100 pitches to VCs before they start signing checks. So what's the biggest mistake that most startups do, right? I'll tell you that. The biggest mistake is the belief that the money is in the idea, right? And it's not. The money is in the execution. The money is not in the idea. Ideas are dime a dozen. The money is in the execution. The biggest mistake that most entrepreneurs do is they fall in love with their idea, and then they take on this mantle of the CTO, and then they start kind of micromanaging the tech team for developing the MVP. Usually what happens in that is that developing the MVP is always an extremely messy and extremely tedious process. And most importantly, there is no perfection in the process. Please, please, please keep this in your mind. A lot of people are looking for their MVPs to be perfect. Do not do that. You'll unnecessarily spend a lot of time in trying to perfect your MVP, right? Instead, have a CTO or have someone on your team who can actually run with it, and let that person be in charge of developing the MVP. What you should do is have one person in sales, and that salesperson should be out on the field getting the first 100 customers. So the day you launch your product, you should already have a list of about 100 users who will sign on and use it. And you, right, when the MVP is getting developed, when the salesperson is on the field getting those 100 people, you should be talking to investors, raising your first round of investment, right? Mistake that most entrepreneurs do is that when they should be out pitching to investors, and when their sales guy should be out getting the first 100 customers, they instead operate one level below, and they actually take on the role of a CTO, and they are micromanaging the dev team into the minutia of the product. And that's where the whole thing kind of slows down. The core team people lose their interest. The whole go-to-market slows down, and I've usually seen that these startups fail. So please keep this in mind, right? So what's the key takeaway from today? The key takeaway is that if you're in your 20s, I always say this, this is my standard. If you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, it does not matter. If you have a product idea and if you're passionate about it, the reason why I say passionate is because creating an online business successfully is as difficult as creating an offline business successfully, right? And the only way to create an offline business successfully is if you're passionate about it, right? Why? Because you're going to go through a lot of ups and downs, and if you do not have the passion for the game, you're not going to make it. So first thing, if you are passionate about your product, if you are passionate about your idea, right, then definitely go for it, 100%, right, without a doubt. I always recommend that give yourself at least 5 years for the idea to pick up and be successful. If you're planning to do this part-time and then make a switch over, that's great. But the best way to do this is actually go headlong into this and give it 5 years of your life. The rate of survival of startups actually is pretty dismal. Most startups don't succeed. Most startups fail. So the ones that do succeed are usually the ones where the owners are putting in 150% of their time and focus. So that's the reason why I always say that if you're planning to launch your own product, if you're planning to launch your own startup, like a SaaS startup, give it 100% and do it as a full-time activity, right? That's number one. Number two is have an awesome team around you, right? Of a sales guy, of an HR guy or a gal, of an admin guy or a gal, of a CTO, and then it's you. Let the CTO run with the product development, right? Let the sales guy go out and get the first 100 users. Let the HR person go and get the next people after these 5 people, right? let them do that. Your job should be to approach the investors, to be pitching all the time, and to get them to sign those checks, because startups by their very nature are extremely capital intensive, and they need a lot of money in the bank, as a lifeline as they continue to grow. Then you can look at either going with VCs or going with crowdfunding or both. But remember, usually you have to at least talk to about 100 VCs before the law of averages kicks in, and then some of them will show an interest, and then a few of those will actually end up signing, right? So be ready for the long haul. Give it at least give this phase at least a year or two, right? But for your startup, if you cannot give 5 years of your life full-time dedicatedly, don't even think of starting, because startups are intense, startups are difficult, and they require 100% of your focus. So I hope you like this. At Avion, we've helped a lot of startups actually develop their MVPs at a fraction of the costs that they would have probably gotten it at elsewhere. And usually what does happen is that the money that they save with us, they can actually spend it and invest it in getting their first 100 users, which is why Avion is an amazing place for you to actually develop your MVP and go to market. So if you have an MVP idea, let us know. These are my coordinates. Give us a shout. If you like the content, press like. If you want to subscribe, press subscribe. And yep, it's Friday today, so I hope all of you have a great weekend. I'll see you on the other side. Thank you so much.